Welcome back to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation with Simon and Brian. Simon, how are you this week?
I'm very excited. Summer is right around the corner, and there's two things I love about summer. It's mountain racing, and it is the sun. And as a big influencer, I decided to go run shirtless in my neighborhood. And yeah, you're picturing it, right?
Oh no,
And
I'm trying not
apparently,
to. I'm trying not to, but keep going.
it's impossible not to, but apparently my shoulder and my back are not used to seeing the sun anymore, and I got this huge sunburn. It's super painful right now. So that's how I'm doing. But Brian, I'm curious, how are you doing, and how are your knees?
My knees are well. I'm training well. I just started coaching the summer youth program here in Glenwood. We go to the track 9 to 11 a.m. We're teaching the little guys, elementary and middle school kids, all about track and field, and I'm having a blast doing it. And I'm getting in all these exercises, all these A skips and B skips and karaoke warm ups because I'm doing them with the kids. I'm kind of show them how to do it. So it's actually kind of beneficial for me from a training point of view and for just the mindset, right? To think like a third grader again, it's super fun. So I'm really enjoying it. My knees are enjoying it. I'm training really well. I'm back to training, and yeah, my knees are good.
Yeah, and you live in Colorado, right? So are the mountains opening up right now, or still pretty covered with snow?
It's a great question. I'm chomping at the bit, and I know my little subculture in the mountains here is chomping at the bit. We're all kind of reading trail reports. We're getting the binoculars out, and we're looking across the valley to see what's on that mountain across the way from me. And yeah, we're getting there. It's not perfect just yet, and actually there is an avalanche warning because it's getting so hot so quickly. Certain gradients of steepness are giving way pretty quick. I think we've had 3 or 4 significant slides this week. So as much as we're trying to get out there, I think we're hopefully we're all communicating and reading the trip reports before we even step out the door, just to kind of make sure that we're being safe in this space. But I want to get up in the high country. I want to get my lungs burning. But gosh, I don't really want to suffer again like I did last year on the first day on the mountain. So you got any ideas for me, Simon?
Well, that is a good question. I'm happy you're asking that because actually our guest today is Anthony from Recal, which helps with athlete or works with athlete with breath work in general, but also there's definitely a program that is more targeted to people like you, Brian, people that want to go in the mountain. I mean, you're kind of already living at altitude, so maybe people like me too that live at sea level and are looking forward to go at 14,000 and feel dizzy and feel kind of bad. But instead of doing that, getting some work in ahead of heading there and preparing their lungs, preparing their body for altitude.
Yeah, it was a great conversation with Anthony. Recal has some great programs on their site, recaltravel.com. We are investing 5 weeks of our time into the High Altitude Breathwork Training course. To kind of give it a run through, and so we meet with Anthony this evening. We listen to his insight, his knowledge base on breathwork training itself, what the adaptations are going to look like. We go pretty deep into the conversation about what this program is, and in 5 weeks' time, we're going to report back, right?
Exactly. And I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think it's something that anyone like myself living at sea level, we're always trying to find solution to when we go in the mountain. Because honestly, I'm knocked out for a few days sometimes. I'll still go up there, I'll still climb a 14er, but then I have a huge headache in the afternoon. I don't sleep well, and it takes a week, 10 days to get used to it. So if we could cut that, and we've talked in the past about running in the middle of the day or these sorts of things in the middle of the
Mm.
heat. But maybe breath work is another way to do that. So we're going to try, and hopefully that's going to help us ahead of Leadville 100, which is coming up pretty soon.
That's right. I guess by the time this comes out, we'll probably be roughly about maybe a little over 8 weeks out from Leadville, and so 5 weeks of breath work. We're going to give it a whirl, and we're going to report back. Without further ado, though, let's get this conversation going with Anthony from Recal Travel. Hey, Anthony, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on this evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate it.
Let's talk a little bit about Recal Travel and what it is, how you found yourself in this space. I think I just saw an email from you that said you've been in business for 3+ years. So give us the background of that, how you got into this space.
Sure, I appreciate it. Yeah, so we've been around for 3 years. I kind of backed up my way into this space, I would say. Fitness and wellness, and in particular breath work, was not something that I came out of college and or I went into college thinking, oh, someday I really want to be a breathwork coach. It was more so I got the entrepreneurial bug when I was in college, started my first company, which was a distillery. So we made all sorts of delicious distilled spirits, completely unrelated industry. That's a conversation I think for another day. And then after having my go at that for about 8 years, I joined the wonderful world of private equity, and that chewed me up and spit me out pretty quick. And I think I went looking for tools and solutions from a mindfulness standpoint that could help me um, control my anxiety, things like that. Come into a day with more energy, focus, ready to take on the challenge of the day. And what I stumbled across in that sort of wide spanning sort of search was breathwork, in particular, the Wim Hof method. After my private equity days, I traveled a bit. I tested out some of these mindfulness practices, and that led me to launch what is Recal, and we combine mindfulness with adventure travel. Now, the type of mindfulness that we focused on was breath work. And the more I got into the breath work world, the more I experimented with things, the more I got more and more certifications, Wim Hof method first. Then I stumbled into something called Oxygen Advantage, which is breathwork for more sport and performance. And with some of my sport and performance background as a former college athlete, a really, really high level Division III college football player, I thought that was a little bit more my realm of breathwork. And so the shape that Recal's taken over the last couple of years really is a breathwork based coaching program that combines adventure travel. So we coach people using breathwork training strategies and protocols and exercises to take on whatever challenge that they've got coming up for them. So it could be somebody going on an expedition and they're trying to tackle the high mountains in the Himalayas, or it could be somebody taking on an endurance event. And I think that's all the more relevant for this particular conversation and how to use breathwork training for that. So that's kind of my winding path, distillery days, private equity days. And hey, here I am coming out the other side as a breathwork coach.
So you're well-rounded. I mean, that's what I'm getting from it, right?
Yes, that's a perfect way of putting it, Brian. Yeah.
So with Recal Travel, do I have to do the trip with you, or can I just do the breath work? Are they separate, or are they married together?
Yeah, good question. So we started the company as an outfitter or more so a tour operator. So we would take people out into nature, practice various forms of mindfulness, breathwork being really the one that rose to the top of our priority list and what we did. And so we spent a couple of years doing trips like that. Now I really saw a big need more so in the market for breathwork based training programs. And in particular, I saw a big need for people that might say live at sea level and they've got really high ambitions of performing in the mountains. Some of the crazy people out there, myself included, I think, that believe that we can do anything as long as our mind is set to it. The body sometimes has some other opinions, as I'm sure you might agree with sometimes. And I saw a need for breathwork training for people to pre-acclimatize, so to speak, to go to the mountain and perform the way that they want to perform. And so I cut out at least for now, the side of the business that's more of a tour operator, and created a coaching based programs for anybody to sign up on their own. It's kind of on demand type of stuff. We've got a few different ways where you can sign up for the trainings and do it on your own in advance of your trip or your challenge or your race, whatever it is that you've got coming up, and kind of do it. So I would say we've gone through a bit of a pivot actually over the last year or so in launching these programs.
So Simon and I are going to be at the Leadville 100. Leadville is 10,000 feet above sea level. It is high. I mean, it's not 14,000 feet, but it is dang high. It's 2 miles above sea level. If we get down right down to it. Is this something that we're going to benefit from? I guess we should come clean and say that, look, we're trying to do like a 2-part series. We're going to do like 5 weeks of this breathwork training. Simon and I have agreed to do this. Simon, you're in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So we're going to do 2 weeks of this breathwork training, or 5 weeks, I'm sorry, of this breathwork training course. And we want to report back our findings. And so is this the right application for that?
Actually, I find this to be the perfect application for this. There's a lot of benefits to breathwork training, and I'm sure I'll get into that here in just a bit. But for you both, first of all, I commend you both for taking on the challenge of doing breathwork training, incorporating that into your overall fitness and endurance training program to then show up at Leadville. But I think it's actually perfectly suited for this, because not only is obviously the air thinner at Leadville, so oxygen partial pressure is going to be lower up at altitude. And therefore, if somebody, say, is not ultra acclimatized to that, or they don't do all of their training at an elevation or altitude like that, like I know Simon, you are located on the coast in California. Am I correct about that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's actually public out there in the world? So is that fair to share?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in particular for you and a lot of others that are signed up for the Leadville 100, if you are a sea level dweller, as I like to say, looking to push your performance at an altitude, like you said, 10,000 feet, this is perfectly suited for that. And I'll dive into some of the pieces of the science behind that as well here in just a bit, if you'd like.
Yeah, let's get into the high altitude breathwork training course itself. What does it consist of? I think I spilled the beans already and said it was 5 weeks long because I was sharing that Simon and I are willing to give it a go for 5 weeks. So yeah, let's dive into the course and kind of maybe break it down however you see best.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good. So from a high level, you both are the perfect people for this type of program. So in terms of like who it's for, it is for somebody that's signed up for an extremely daunting challenge like the Leadville 100, where you've got not only endurance ahead of you and pushing yourself to the limit, you've got an altitude challenge, which is many times for people the X factor for a race or for an expedition, right? It's also, though, can be used for anybody that's got a more casual stroll in the mountains, not necessarily a Leadville 100, but something a little bit more casual. If they're just looking to enjoy the mountain more, not be quite as breathless, as I say, not have to cope with that panicky feeling of breathless if they're just hiking or trekking in the mountains, it could be good for that. Or for those that have signed up for, say, an expedition with an outfitter in the Himalayas, or they're trying to take on Aconcagua down in Argentina, or Denali up in Alaska. Somebody that's just trying to tackle, the 7 Summit Challenge, all the highest peaks on all 7 continents. And if they don't have access to a quote unquote home mountain and some high altitude to acclimatize along the way, breathwork training can be the perfect fit for that person that's looking to supplement their overall fitness training program and do something for it from a pre-acclimatization standpoint. So you both are kind of the perfect fit for this, I think. What you're about to experience over the course of 5 weeks is basically 3 key things that we want to accomplish using breathwork training. The first one, from a very simple high-level standpoint, we want you to be able to breathe more efficiently. And that's not so straightforward because there's actually a lot of controversial and or conflicting opinions on what breathing efficiently really means. And from my school of thought, and really the school of thought today, as it's building and building in the world of breathwork and the research and science that's out there, it's really a key thing, what we call nose, slow, and low being the most efficient way of breathing. Breathe through your nose, breathe slow, and breathe low into your diaphragm. Now, I'll dive a little bit more into that, but one of the key parts of the breathwork training program is to get you the ability to breathe nose, slow, and low. Okay. That way, throughout your challenge, that way, while you're at Leadville, you can actually be oxygenating your body most efficiently. The second area that we cover is making adaptations in your body. So what do I mean when I say make adaptations to your body? The first one is actually going to be an adaptation that will enable you to breathe nose, slow, and low, NSL, nose, slow, and low. And that is by increasing your carbon dioxide tolerance. So you have chemoreceptors in your brainstem, and they're constantly judging the pH of your blood. I'm going to dive into the science, so please bear with me. I'm going to communicate it as slowly and as clearly as possible here. But you have basically chemoreceptors in your brainstem that are judging the pH of your blood at all times. Okay. As you start to move your body and you're metabolically churning through glucose and oxygen and producing ATP, which allows your body to obviously move, a byproduct of that cellular respiration process is carbon dioxide. What carbon dioxide does in your blood is it acidifies your blood. It will drop that pH in your blood just slightly. And therefore, the chemoreceptors in your brainstem are going to start screaming to you louder and louder as the pH goes down that you need to breathe faster. You need to offload carbon dioxide, because when we exhale, we're offloading carbon dioxide. Just a simple fact of breathing there. When we inhale, we're primarily doing that for oxygen. When we exhale, we're primarily doing that to offload carbon dioxide. Now, you might guess already at this point, if you're running in the Leadville 100 and there's limited oxygen in the air already due to the partial pressure being lower at that type of altitude, and you're moving your body as much as you possibly can, you're churning through all that glucose, all that oxygen to produce ATP so that you can move, you're producing a lot more carbon dioxide, your chemoreceptors are going to be yelling at you louder and louder and louder, and therefore they're going to be pushing you to exhale stronger and stronger and stronger. Therefore, you might need to resort to breathing through your mouth and exhaling a lot and overbreathing. That is not necessarily the most efficient way of breathing. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. One of them is that by overbreathing at that type of rate, you are actually enabling the dead space inside your lungs to make a larger impact on how much oxygen you can get into your lungs. The most efficient respiratory rate at rest is 6 breaths per minute. The average person today breathes between 12 and 18 breaths at rest. So what that is basically saying is by overbreathing, you're allowing dead space in your lungs to not recycle basically the amount of air through your lungs and more efficiently oxygenate your body. Now, there's a second component of this CO2 tolerance sort of field of thought here. And that is by something called the Bohr effect. It's named the Bohr effect because of a Danish chemist named Christian Bohr. He found that basically in the hemoglobin inside your red blood cell, it's the protein that carries the oxygen around to the muscles that need it. So say on this Leadville race, your calves are going to be screaming for oxygen at some point in time. They get oxygen delivered to them by their red blood cells. The connection or affinity between an oxygen molecule that red blood cell picked up from your lungs and starts to deliver it to that calf, that affinity is going to be stronger in a higher pH environment. Okay. So what you really want is not a strong connection between that oxygen and that hemoglobin. You actually want a looser one so that it will drop off the oxygen. It'll distribute the oxygen more efficiently throughout your body. And the way that you can do that, the way that you can get to a lower pH in your blood is by having a stronger carbon dioxide tolerance. Okay. So if you have a stronger carbon dioxide tolerance, you can maintain a slightly lower pH and therefore allow the hemoglobin to drop off the oxygen throughout your body. So again, carbon dioxide tolerance is going to allow you to breathe nose, slow, and low so that you can oxygenate your keep oxygen flowing through your lungs most efficiently, and then allow your red blood cells to do what they're designed to do during the race, which is deliver the oxygen to the places that need it.
Anthony, Simon, I don't know. Simon's probably at 34 feet above sea level. Am I right, Simon?
Yeah, I'm on the second floor, so 44.
44 feet above sea level, and I'm at 7,000 feet above sea level. I live pretty dang close to Leadville. Are we
Mm-hmm.
going to experience the same effects with this training course?
Yeah.
I'm already pretty close to 10,000 feet, but I'm not there
Yeah.
every day. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. This will be a fun experiment, you both going through the breathwork training from different elevations. So, from the starting point, number one, your breath assessments are likely going to be different from each other out of the gate. And what I mean by that is, as you enter a breathwork training program like the one that we've created here at Recal, the 5-week training program, you come in and you do 3 breath assessments. Okay. The first one is called a BOLT score, which stands for body oxygen level test. The second one is a carbon dioxide tolerance test, which we just talked about carbon dioxide tolerance. Obviously, this is a test to actually gauge your personal carbon dioxide tolerance. And then the third one is a maximum breathlessness test. Basically, plug your nose, hold your breath, and walk for as many paces as you can. These assessments are how we know where your starting point is. These assessments are also impacted by altitude. So, Brian, don't feel so bad when Simon comes in with a much better or higher BOLT score out of the gate versus you. Okay. It's
It's
all
too late
about.
because I already do, because we've already shared our numbers with each other, and I know that he can walk way farther than I can without taking a breath.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm telling you then, no judgment. Okay, Brian, there's no
Okay.
judgment. Don't think that you're in some way worse. It's really about where you go from here. So Brian, now the
Okay.
real work is still ahead of you. Okay. As any good coach, I think, would say. So
Perfect.
that's one difference that you're going to see between the both of you. Now, separately, you might find, even right now, if you were to take your bloods, for example, if you were to go get a blood test, Brian, I'm guessing, I don't really know this, of course, and I'm totally speculating here, so take this with a grain of salt, but I would assume that your hemoglobin concentration is already going to be higher than Simon's. So, to make the same sort of jump or leap is going to be probably harder for you. So you've got your work cut out for you, but you're already in some way somewhat acclimatized and ready for Leadville, more so probably than Simon is at his whopping 44 feet above sea level. So that's going to be one of the differences that you're going to face. So probably some like percentage changes, differences, which leads me really to another one of the adaptations that breathwork training makes. So we talked about adaptation from a carbon dioxide tolerance standpoint. Another adaptation that breathwork training can allow you to do, and specifically, this is through 2 different styles of breathwork protocols. The first one is something called intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training. That's hypoxic, low oxygen, hypercapnic, high CO2 training. Through published research, what they've found is using these type of breathwork protocols, you can actually increase your hemoglobin concentration. In one particular example of a study, upwards of 5.35%. So one of the adaptations that we can make through doing this type of training is actually increasing your red blood cell count or your hemoglobin concentration. Now, how you can actually look to test that, yes, you could go get your bloods done if you wanted to now and then do it again after the 5 weeks and test it out again. There are some other variable factors, dehydration level, if you've had food, that kind of stuff, caffeine, that's going to change actually how your bloods turn out. So it's a little bit of a finicky kind of test. What I would also maybe recommend doing is doing your VO2 max now versus later. Your VO2 max, of course, it's the total oxygen uptake capacity of your body. With new red blood cells, your total oxygen uptake capacity is going to go up. So in particular with this study, they showed a 10% increase over the period of time that people were doing intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training. That's extremely significant. And we not only use the IHHT, intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training, we also do other series of breath hold exercises that are purely hypoxic in nature, which those are designed to enable the kidneys to release erythropoietin through these strong, strong maximum breath holds. They release erythropoietin, or EPO. Some of the listeners out there are probably familiar with EPO, especially if you're familiar with the endurance cycling side of things. EPO instigates the creation of new red blood cells. So we kind of do a double whammy. We do the IHHT stuff as well as some of the pure breath hold hypoxic type of work, almost Wim Hof method, by the way, style of breathwork protocol. And so this is a really advantageous adaptation that breathwork training can result in for the both of you. It'll be exciting to see where you both take it.
Curious, if you would compare it to taking APO, how significant would that be? Because obviously people are doping, so
Yep.
they seem to
Yes,
think
they
that the
are.
injection is better, or an hyperbar chamber, or like it feels that there's a lot of other things that are done rather than breath work.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. There are other things out there. Of course, doping. I don't condone anybody to illegally dope so that they can have an edge on somebody in performance. Obviously, I don't stand by that at all. I am not as familiar with the amount of EPO that somebody does inject and what those spikes look like. I know that through some of the testing that's been done out there and published research, you can actually get upwards of 24% increase in erythropoietin production from your body by doing some of these very simple exercises. I don't know though, Simon, how 24% by doing breathwork exercises compares to somebody that's doing doping. I would assume, by the way, that the doping is likely significantly higher than the way that you can get EPO by just naturally doing it through breathwork training. But then to your other point in terms of hypoxic chambers and whatnot, there's of course, there are many ways for you to create for yourself a personal pre-acclimatization program. I'm not against any of the tools that are out there. And I certainly would support if somebody wants to go ahead and do that, they can. Some of them can be costly, of course. But if you've got the ability to do that, absolutely make that happen. There's advantages and disadvantages to all of these. What I think we are creating here at Recal through our breathwork training programs is a way for you to do this naturally, but also make it holistic. So our breathwork training program, for example, is going to simulate in small doses a hypoxic state. You're going to do that yourself in a very acute, controlled way through that acute challenge for your body, that your body is going to go through that very stressful moment, and it's going to, through that eustress, actually make adaptations itself over time. This can be supplementary, obviously, to a hypoxic chamber. But beyond that, it's not just our body making adaptations, it's our mind as well. Now, the breathwork training, I always like to say the hidden consequence of doing a high altitude breathwork training program is the mental resilience that you're going to walk out there with, which I think speaks just as much, if not more, to somebody's likelihood of finishing a race like Leadville 100 is how strong are they mentally. So we kind of put all these things together in a well-rounded way through the 5-week training program.
I think you do bring up a great point. I think that there is a holistic nature to breathing. I do have some familiarity with the pricing structures of the hypoxic tents, those nighttime sleeping aids, and they are they're not in my ballpark for sure. They are pretty pricey, and so this is an alternative, right? This is a much more affordable option. This also gets you, I think, in touch with yourself, your own breathing structure. I am pretty consciously aware of my own breathing throughout the day. I do close my mouth a lot and breathe through my nose and try to relax my heart rate. I try to get the 6 breaths. I'm probably not there, but maybe 8 or 10 breaths a minute. So I do consciously do that. I do want to dive into the 5 weeks. What are Simon and I looking for? Like, what are the changes between weeks 1 through 5, and without spilling the whole beans, but basically, like, how does it progress, and what adaptations should we be noticing?
Yeah, absolutely. So The first, so yeah, I'll walk you through basically what a 5 week set of exercises kind of look like. What's the progression like? So week one is primarily about getting your assessments down so that you know where your starting point is, so that you know actually how to measure yourself week over week over week. Obviously, if we don't know where we're starting from, then we can't measure our gains, obviously. So week one is primarily around that. And then it also introduces just fundamentally the basics behind the exercises that we dive into. As you go into week two and week three, we do more of the same kind of exercises, but with number one, more time involved or more intensity, and number two, with more sport specific movements. Because through doing something like intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training, you're making adaptations specifically to those muscles that you're actually using, right? So you're starving them of oxygen, you're making them go into a hypoxic state. You're actually going to increase the lactate production for those very specific areas of your body. And through that stress over time, that's where the adaptations come in. So we do get fairly sport specific with it. So in your case, I would advise you to do, more running type of movements. If I'm training somebody more on a bike or a rower, then we want to go more sport specific and do the exercises with that type of movement, obviously. So we get more sport specific as weeks go on, whereas in the first week, you're really starting with the same type of stuff. And then we start to introduce an additional component to the training after week three. We actually introduce then a sports mask, which is really a branded name from Oxygen Advantage, which is the breathwork training entity in which a lot of this type of research and science and practical application comes from. Oxygen Advantage. It's basically an air resistance mask, okay, or a high altitude simulation mask. This leads us to the third part of three of what the benefits are to the training program. Again, to recap, as I had mentioned, we want you breathing more efficiently. That's point number one. Number two, we want to make adaptations in your body. And then number three, we want to strengthen your respiratory muscles. Now, starting in week three of the training program, you introduce that sports training mask, or if you don't have a mask, that's fine. If you've got an index pointer finger, you can do a poor man's sports mask by plugging one nostril for some of these exercises. And that's going to introduce resistance to your inspiration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The inspiration. That's extremely key because when you show up at the Leadville 100 at 10,000 feet, the air there is going to be less dense than the air down at sea level. Now, if you were Simon right now to take a big gulp of air, that didn't require too much effort from you to bring in that air, because air, a volume of air, moves from a higher pressure volume to a lower pressure volume. You've got a decently high pressure outside your lungs. So when you inhale, that air is going to move fairly easily into your lungs. In contrast to that, when you show up in Leadville, that air is a lot thinner. It is not going to move as much. So not only is there going to be less percentage of air in of oxygen, in that volume of air in Leadville, it's going to be less dense, and therefore it's going to require you to pull in the air. You're going to need to use your respiratory muscles, in particular inspiratory side of your respiratory muscles, to bring in the air. And so what this sports mask does that we introduce in week three, again, or just your index finger, is it's going to start to create resistance. Therefore, you're going to start working on that diaphragm and actually training it to be able to pull in the air more efficiently and become stronger. That's also extremely important too. If you're on the race and your diaphragm has needed to work really hard and it's not well conditioned to that lower pressure air, it's going to come to the point of reaching failure. And what you're going to do is you're going to start to draw from other areas of your body, your chest, your shoulders, to kind of make up for that lack of muscle conditioning that you've got. Then all of a sudden, you're breathing up in your chest, which is not optimal. The bottom 6 branches of your bronchi, you have 23 branches in your bronchi moving from top to bottom. The bottom branches 17 through 23 are where 70% of the gas exchange, oxygen into bloodstream, actually occurs. You want the oxygen to go deep into your lungs. If you're breathing up in your chest, you're not getting the oxygen low enough to really get into your blood. And also you start to pull from other areas that, quite frankly, you don't want to pull from. Your breathing economy, so to speak, while racing drops significantly, and your overall movement economy then takes a hit as well, because you start to pull on muscles that aren't really designed to do the breathing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's week 3. Week 4 is the most intense. We really push it pretty hard in that one, and then we come to week 5, which is more of a taper type of week, specifically around the strength training and around the movement. We taper that down, but we don't at all taper. Actually, we go up a notch on the adaptation push. That's actually the period of time when we push the hardest on these hypoxic exercises, breath hold exercises, to make one last hemoglobin concentration increase type of push, CO2 tolerance type of push there in that last week. So that's sort of the arc of the 5-week program. Assessments early on, so you know what you're going from. Build through more intensity, more sport specific movements. Week 4 is the most intense from a strength training and movement standpoint, and then week 5 is a taper week.
And Anthony, it's, I would be assuming, and I kind of know the answer to this, but for those that maybe aren't put the numbers together themselves, are we doing this 5 weeks out from our main event? In a typical scenario, even though Simon and I we are farther than 5 weeks out for Leadville. Simon has some other mountain racing. I have some other high altitude 14er stuff I want to do in the mountains. But would we be doing this 5 weeks out from our main event?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Brian. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the main event date, by the way. It's really the date in which you're going to show up at altitude. So if you backtrack 5 weeks from that, so I know obviously some people come to Leadville early, some people come to Boulder for a bit. Then this is just an example that I know of. People come to Boulder for a bit, then they come to Leadville. So whenever you are going to be going up a significant amount, 5,000 feet or so in altitude, in advance of your race, you want to backtrack 5 weeks from that point so that you can show up with a nice pre-acclimatization sort of adaptation in your body, ready to rock and roll.
What amount of time should people reserve for this every week or every day during those
Good
5
question,
weeks?
Simon. So for you and Brian, you'll be looking at about 15 to 20 minutes per training day. So we recommend that you do the breathwork protocols, the exercises effectively, 5 to 7 days a week, and they take about 15 to 20 minutes. What I recommend, these exercises can be a great way of actually warming up the system for another type of activity. Now, in week 4, things do get a bit more intense. Your legs might be a little bit feeling a little jelly in them before you go on like a really long race. If you did week 4's exercises beforehand, so I don't necessarily recommend that. But they can act as a great warm up. One of the primary reasons behind that is that you are going to increase the level of carbon dioxide in your system. And that actually acts as a vasodilator. So it's going to open up your blood vessels, which is going to help with the overall oxygenation that you're going to need for whatever workout that you have. It also, some of the exercises will take advantage of nitric oxide, which is a beautiful gas that's a part of our breathing function. Inside your nose, through doing some very small breath holds, like right now, if you were just to pinch your nose and hold your breath for just 5 seconds, and then when you inhale again, inhale through your nose, you're actually bringing in nitric oxide. That nitric oxide does 2 things. Number one, it helps with the gas diffusion in your lungs, so that basically that oxygen going from your lungs into your bloodstream, it acts as almost like a grease on the gears, so to speak, to get that oxygen into your bloodstream. And then the second thing is similar to the carbon dioxide, is it dilates your blood vessels as well. So it gets you ready for a workout. So some of these exercises are great to do as a warm up. I also recommend people do them in the morning, before even they've had their coffee or their food, as a way to get charged up and ready to go for the day. So 15 to 20 minutes per training day. And those are the types of ways that you can tack it on to your habit stacking, so to speak, if you're into that.
We're looking into the 2-3 hours a week, basically, which is significant. That would be like for me 15-20 miles. So yeah.
Right. Of your normal training program, you mean, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I think a question that anyone would be asking is, you're practicing breathing essentially, or kind of having to take in more liters of air when you'll be at altitude because of the lower atmospheric pressure. But then when you're running, you're doing that too. So I think that that's a natural inclination to say, what's the best use of my 2-3 hours a week?
I actually want to clarify because I'm not quite sure that I'm following there. So what I'm saying is these very specific breathwork protocols, these exercises can and should be done before you were to start that 2 hours of running, for example, if you've got
No,
uh,
yeah. So what I mean is
Yeah.
that there's 24 hour in a day, and we work and we do things, and I can only realistically put, say, 10 hour of working out in a week. Um,
mhm,
and if I do the breathing protocol, then I'm falling to a maybe 7 hour, which will mean that I'll be running less. And then the
mm.
question is, should I do the 10 hour of only running, or should I do 7-8 hours of running and then do the breath work? Well, I understand it's the opposite order, but in terms of time management.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Okay, I understand it more. It's more like with a set limited capacity, where are you pulling from to make the time for the breathwork protocols? That's ultra personal for whoever's getting into it. If so, for example, the 5 week program that we've launched, there's an online element to this. So we've got a bunch of videos and a lot of instruction inside that online training course, as both of you know, as you've gotten into it. In there, we kind of outline ways in which you can work this into your day or work it into your training plan. Some of the exercises are as simple as sitting in a meditation type of posture. So if you're already a meditator, Simon, and you don't include that in your quote unquote 10 hours per week that you plan for your endurance training or your strength training, and you meditate already, you can maybe switch to this style of meditation because there's a breathwork exercise that you can do which is similar to meditating. For your warm up before getting into your run, if there's a 5 minute window where you kind of go back and forth on something, you could actually then do one or two of the specific breathwork exercises in that as a part of the warm up. So you're not actually pulling something away, you're just kind of trading something
Mhm.
out, if that makes sense. So more so what I should say is if you're indifferent about some piece of a warm up for your long run or something, if you're indifferent about what you do for that, you could maybe include and insert this into that. So it's ultra personal. While you're running, by the way, if you've already done some of this training, you know how you're supposed to be breathing. That is going to probably benefit your run, and you're going to be running more with more optimal breathing along the way. You're probably going to be training your carbon dioxide during that run anyway. So while yes, it's not the designated 15 to 20 minutes that I say needs to go to these exercises, having learned what you're learning through this type of training program, that's going to benefit your 2 hours that you're actually running, because maybe you're pushing yourself harder on nasal breathing, even into zone 3 potentially. For example, there, I know a lot of people think that the threshold for nose breathing is zone 2. It's totally dependent on your carbon dioxide tolerance. My goal is to actually get nose breathers into zone 3.
So I kind of hear Simon's point, but I don't know. I think there. I mean, I don't think there's a hard answer, and I don't know if Simon was looking for a hard answer. We're
No,
all
I'm
trying to
trying.
micro.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to hear Anthony's perspective, because I think this is something that anyone planning their week will think of: is how am I
Mhm.
managing the time, and then just trying to hear what Anthony thinks the benefits are. Because I mean, I can say more running, but I could say, we had the strength training discussion a couple of weeks ago. So should someone include more breath work instead of strengthening? And at some point, there's a capacity.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious to
Mhm.
hear your perspective on that. And then it sounds that it's trying to incorporate within things that are already existing, such as meditation, if someone
Yeah.
already does that.
From my point of view, from a coaching point of view, um, I do see a lot of athletes. I have quite a big history at Leadville, and I think people kind of seek me out sometimes for that Leadville knowledge specifically. I do have a lot of athletes this year going to Leadville. I have a lot of athletes that live in the South, low altitude in the humid heat, and they all want to come up to altitude and race the race across the sky, right? Leadville 100. And yeah, they might be losing some. As a coach, I see a benefit. I think if they might be losing some time from running specifically, but if they can gain some sort of, if they can gain that 10% acclimatization to higher altitude, I think that goes actually quite a far way from a coaching perspective for specific people that don't live where I live. I know you, Simon, have experience with altitude. In previous years, we've ran at high altitude before, and I live pretty dang high already. But I do see those athletes coming to me that really could benefit from a breathwork program, and it almost might it almost might pay off as opposed to doing the 3 hours of running a week.
Yeah,
That's
I
just my
mean,
perspective.
and I feel a lot of the discussion that we've had are also connected to that because, I mean, one of the question, I can't remember who asked it, but it was from Georgia asking, well, what about running in the middle of the day in the heat? Will that help me out? And and then, that you're always looking for the best way to adapt to altitude. So is it better
Mm-hmm.
to run in the heat with humidity? Is it better to do breath work? Should you do
Mm-hmm.
both of them? So try to guide people towards what we think is the best way to adapt, because obviously it's a big challenge.
And I think that's part of the process. I mean, I think both of us are going to give this a whirl and give it a try. I'm going to definitely be interested to see. I think the adaptations that you're explaining, I go through annually. The high country's melting out right now in the big mountains here, and we're all kind of, at least my little niche market of 14ers.com are all kind of throwing up trail reports, and then, oh, I could see it
Mm-hmm.
from this roadway, and it's starting to dry out. So we're all itching to get up high, and I get it. And I always suffer those for a few weeks, so I'm kind of curious to see if I suffer less or if I don't even suffer at all. Maybe I just get up there, and by the end of the season, I'm usually fine. So by the end, it always works out. But I do suffer those first few times, so I'm really curious.
I'm excited to hear back from you on that, Brian. And what an exciting time now. 14er trail reports coming in, and they're saying it's clearing up. That's awesome. Um, I'll say this as well quickly, Simon, to your point, because I can see how compounding these conversations one after another, it might sound and seem like, well, the only way
Mm-hmm.
to be better is doing more, 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 more. And what I'll throw out there is my coach during some of my own challenges, actually, that were part of the test trials that got us to the point of creating what is now the Recal High Altitude Breathwork Training Program, was with the coach. His name is David Jacko Jackson. And he was very vocal about not just more, 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 but more, more efficient. And when doing an exercise like intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training, it is ultra efficient. If you were to hold your breath and run stairs, for example, and then walk back down with the sports mask on, with that resistance, walk down as your recovery for 50 seconds, for example, and then go back up, do that for 5 reps, you're going to feel like you just ran for an hour, hour and a half just in your legs. You're starving those muscles again of that oxygen. You're actually forcing your body to more efficiently buffer that lactate. And by not necessarily doing more in terms of time, but just changing the way in which you're doing these exercises. So if somebody has a big strength training day, for example, and they know they're going to be doing a ton of lunges, why not spend the first 10 minutes of that big lunge day with IHHT, with the sport specific movement of lunges? Therefore, you're actually tapping into efficiency and not just necessarily more
Mm-hmm.
time. Does that make sense, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, we could go in theories, right? I think there would be two ways to adapt to that. You can work on your breathing to restrict the amount of oxygen you have and increase the CO2, or you could increase intensity. So then it comes
Mm-hmm.
back to, well, maybe you should run interval to increase VO2 max, which is kind of what we recommend also. So
Mm-hmm.
are they redundant method or they're complementary?
Yeah, and I think that this is a perfect complement to the overall training program, and that's really what I'm pushing for, and not necessarily a direct replacement or a direct addition to, but to be a complementary type of thing to an existing program is really where I believe and I stand by, and I'm really promoting out there to the world of where breathwork training stands and should fit.
And
Yeah,
actually,
of
I
course. I
saw it.
mean,
Yeah.
you defend it, and I support that. I need to ask hard question, but obviously you're here. You create a course, so of course you believe in it, and I want you to be able to express like where do you think it fits in the training. So I think it's cool. I think it's
Yeah.
important to try different method. Also, when it comes to altitude training, I mean, I've tried acclimatation. I tried cold turkey. I think acclimatation is the best, but the cold turkey is not fun. So hopefully that's in between. That would be great.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is, and I do actually want to make this clear as well. It's a disclaimer, really, for everybody out there. Um, I don't know about the cold turkey method. I know about the breathwork training method, and that is, it is not a direct replacement to acclimatization on the mountain. I want to make that ultra clear. This is not something that is a magic pill or a silver bullet. Something that you can just do and then not have to worry about what happens to your own personal body as you're actually going up the mountain. I don't want anybody to think that that's at all the case here. This is pure pre-acclimatization and getting yourself ready
Mm-hmm.
for when you show up to the mountain.
Yeah.
So all my clients that are listening to this, and I tell you to come out 10 days early for Leadville, you should still come out 10 days early for Leadville. You could also do this breathwork program and then come out 10 days early for Leadville.
Yes, that's exactly right. And then my hope is that after you did come out 10 days early, you performed much better than you ever expected because of the breathwork training program that you did before showing up on the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, your athlete should really do Alpert. I think that's my classic. Just before Leadville, I go and do Alpert.
Oh,
That
God.
feels pretty good. Then Massive also is really nice. If you can do the double, if you can do the double in the same day, I think you're ready for Leadville. There's no question in my mind. It's good distance, good climb.
I love Elbert. I've been up there a ton of times, but gosh, it is so popular. I know it's the highest in Colorado. It has the shortest trail and all those things, but it is just overwhelming sometimes for me when I go up there. So
Number of people, you mean, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
I
it's
love the mountain, but the people
yeah,
and the
it's
crowds.
like
Yeah.
it's a class one, right? Like it's basically just a trail uphill, but it's a good workout, and you don't need to know mountaineering to do it, as opposed to the fun 14ers.
Brian, is there a best time to do Albert? Like time, either day of week, time. I mean, if you've got the experience of when those crowds are highest, I'm asking for a
Oh,
friend,
well,
so
I
to
mean,
speak.
yeah, I guess I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this one, but I would say the weekdays are always the least amount. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday seem to be the quieter ones. On the weekends, the crowds go out. You got your typical 9 to 5ers in the Front Range. They come out to the mountains. On the weekends, they come out on Friday. They go out on Saturday, Sunday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are usually good days. But actually, gosh, I can't even believe I'm going to say this. For Elbert, it's the Black Cloud route. You have to go the Black Cloud
Hmm.
route. You won't see a single person until you hit the summit. And people will
Hmm.
look at you completely strange. They'll like, where did you come from? And because you just came off a whole different side of the mountain. So if you're going to do Elbert and you don't want to deal with the crowds, it's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit longer. I think it's a little more gain. I think it's about 5,000 feet vertical gain. You're coming from the Twin Lakes side, way back in that canyon back there. And Black Cloud route is the way to go. That's my Elbert tip for today.
Yeah, otherwise you need to go to the parking at like 3 in the morning.
Mm.
It's absolutely insane to go to the normal route. But that's the direction you need to do if you want to do massive, like if you want to do the double.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anthony, I'm looking forward to the breathwork process. I am super curious on what 5 weeks is going to do for my blood platelets and all that science you just gave us.
Hmm.
Where can people find Recal Travel? Where's the best place to find you, ask questions, find out more about your program?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it. Well, simple and straightforward. Obviously, recaltravel.com, but I don't know how many people necessarily go to websites these days. You can find us on Instagram as well at Recal Travel, or me at Anthony Lorubbio. That's spelled Lorubbio. A couple of fun things that we release on a very regular basis are Monday morning breathwork sessions. They are not necessarily high altitude breathwork in nature. That's kind of reserved for a different type of clientele, but Monday morning breathwork to get you charged up and ready for the week. So we do one of those live stream, but it becomes a video that somebody can watch back at any time. So that's a fun thing we offer in the world. And then, we're always throwing out more content on a very regular basis related to breathwork for sport performance purposes. So have a heads up on those channels for that.
Monday morning breathwork. Where can we find that at? Is it social media?
Yeah, so we do we multi-stream to many platforms. So it's streamed out to YouTube, LinkedIn Live, Instagram Live, Facebook. I'm still working on the TikTok thing. I haven't quite gotten there, but so yeah, it kind of goes out to all the platforms that we distribute to.
Excellent. Well, I think we probably need to get off this call, but once we do, we need to figure out 5 weeks from when we start this program and get you back on and kind of talk through the results and see where Simon and I are at. It's going to be an interesting 5 weeks for two different perspectives. One from High Mountain guy. Simon's going to be coming up here in a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I'm racing at altitude in between, but yeah, and I think we should we can invite listeners, especially the one that are gonna race Leadville. If you want to do something extra to prepare for altitude, I mean, you should look into it. I think everything that can help is important. Leadville is a tough one. Racing at altitude is a bitch. So anything you can do that can help is welcomed.
And for those that are doing Leadville or they're coming through Boulder to get to Leadville, I am based in Boulder, actually, for everybody out there too. So Boulder, Colorado.
Thanks for coming on, Anthony. We'll catch up to you in 5 weeks. We'll be in touch sooner than that, but we'll give the listeners an update in about 5 weeks. So be listening for that coming out. And thanks again, guys.
Yeah, looking forward to the future convo. See you guys. Thanks.
I'm Simon, and that's Brian.
We'd be thrilled to connect with you beyond our show.
For all of your endurance coaching requirement, you can reach out to Coach Brian at altitudeendurancecoaching.com.
To explore more of Simon's content, visit Running with Simon on YouTube.
Don't forget to rate, like, and share our content regularly.
Your support means a lot to us. Thanks.